We've added a couple of players already this winter on the overseas side of things. Caleb Jewell was announced quite early on. He'll be joining for all formats 2025. And Blair Tickner's returning. We'll move on to the individuals in a moment. But first, can you just give me a little bit of context as to how you identify overseas players? What is the process? And what kind of pool are Derbyshire looking in at the moment?
Yeah, so again, overseas recruitment has been a criticism again, and rightly so when things don't perform and some of the the ideas don't pan out in the way that we'd hoped. But the process is robust. We plan for different scenarios in terms of budgets and other players coming in. Really, it depends on the market, and the market is challenging. It's challenging domestically, and it's also challenging, internationally. Particularly if you're trying to find an overseas that is available for the majority or the full season. And we've got to be realistic about what our budgets are, and ultimately then the pool that we are fishing in for that talent. But within that remit, we really try to find that gem that we're all looking for the fee that we're paying ultimately. There's no doubt when Mickey came in that he used a couple of jokers from his experience, joker cards. Well, that's what I mean in terms of not the players, but the joker cards in terms of the experience and the relationships that had developed at different international teams. Shan Masood, Zaman Khan, and they were fantastic deals. Even Mohamed Amir last year, unfortunately. Yeah, we had came out of international retirement and we couldn't legislate for that. We as I said, we've got the different sort of scenarios, and that's what we did this year. With the recruits that we've got, and we had honest conversations about last year. And again, ultimately, it comes down to Mickey's decision. We are obviously critical for that, but effectively you've got to either back your coach or sack your coach, in terms of doing that effectively. So, but we really put a lens on that this year. We really challenged Mickey to go to different markets within the budget that we had and really stretch his connections in that sense. And again, Caleb Jewell, that came from a conversation with George Bailey. I think Ian Bell had also been talking to Mickey about Caleb from his time at the Hobart Hurricanes, prior to even the conversation that we had, recently about him. And again, all of that was positive. He was available, which was great. And again, we had another couple of scenarios of players that we were talking about, and actually then we decided, that Caleb was the style of player that we want. Attacking left-handed batsman, he can also catch in the slips, having dropped so many catches in the slips last year. He looks a safe pair of hands, famous last words. So it wasn't a decision that was made on a whim. It's not that we've got a dartboard up with names up that we're throwing darts at. And again, the same on Blair. It wasn't, Blair has obviously come back, but that wasn't decided straight away. It was to consider what we want. Statistically, people can look last year and say, well, Blair wasn't blow away in terms of the statistics that he had, but it doesn't give the picture of the drop catches and the influence that those drop catches might have had on the game. And ultimately then, it's difficult to say, but Blair is obviously hungry. He had a unique circumstance with Sarah. I think he feels like he's got unfinished business here, and that ultimately, the club have treated him really well, and I think that all gives for a good cocktail. He's obviously performing very well in New Zealand as well, and I just get the sense that he is going to run in next year with a different hunger that any other overseas, would run in for us really. Now, what happens thereafter, hopefully he has the season that he deserves, and obviously the team then feed off that and benefit from it.
Yeah, and just on the individuals, both for different reasons, there's probably been a little bit of uncertainty around, of course, Blair with Sarah's situation and Caleb with, up until very recently, not the best form. So how kind of close has contact been between Mickey and those players, and then feeding back to the board this winter about what the players' mindset is and the certainty as to whether they would be arriving at Derbyshire or not?
So Caleb's obviously had a tough period, a little bit of a barren run, and again, even during that period of time, I know that Mickey reached out to David Hussey, to get a view from him. How's he looking sort of, over there? And again, it was a glowing report. Guys go through tough runs, and there's been a lot happening with openers in Australia, and Caleb was in that conversation and unfortunately sort of slipped behind, and I know how hungry, again, he is to come to Derbyshire. I think he's looking to arrive a little bit earlier in terms of settling himself in. And in all honesty, I'm bothered about how he performs for Derbyshire. And coming over and doing your first overseas role is a big sort of maturing step in the career. And you're fulfilling that overseas responsibility really. And hopefully, he can, feed off that and play that role and start us off with the intent and the positivity that we're looking to, and assert ourselves in the game on that basis, really. And then on Blair, we've stayed in regular contact with Blair just as a person, first and foremost. Relationships obviously are forged here last year with what happened. It had an effect on all of the changing room and the coaching staff. So we've stayed in regular contact with Blair to say, look, practically, is the deal going to happen on the basis of Sarah's health? And thankfully and encouragingly, it seems that she's responded well to treatment, and as such, Blair's obviously hungry to get over, and so that's great. But that was literally almost weekly, daily communication, of which then Mickey was reporting back into. We've got a cricket committee WhatsApp group, which is how everybody sort of communicates on an ongoing basis, and so that information was coming back because we were also planning a few scenarios if that wasn't the case, that we had to go back to the market, what opportunities were available if that was the case. So and then ultimately, obviously, it was announced, and we were comfortable that was going to be the case. And hopefully, Blair continues to perform in the way that he has. Obviously, we've got Ben Smith over there as well, so that's been very useful. And yeah, I just really hope that Blair carries this form on. I just think when you have something like Blair's, I've had things that happened to me during my career in a unique fashion. I think it just gives you a different perspective. You play the game in a different way, and actually, it's often a refreshing way then to then treat the game going forward, really, and hopefully that translates for Blair and his performances going forward.
And just lastly on overseas players, looking at the wider game, I think sometimes when there's criticism of overseas players, it's maybe with one eye on the game as it was in the past, where the very best international players would be coming to England for a full summer, whereas now that is very rarely the case. There are so many T20 tournaments around the world and so much international cricket, it's hard to attract the very best international players for all formats.
Yeah.
So how do, firstly, Derbyshire navigate in that space, but then also how would you say that we compare, especially when looking at sustainable budgets, to the rest of county cricket?
We're very lucky that we've got a coach that has got such broad and vast international experience and relationships. And that's obviously across lots of different nations. So if the budget was there, we would have no problem. Mickey would be straight on the phone to a player to facilitate that opportunity. Again, I think it's just realistic with where we are in terms of we have to take a money ball approach. That's just what we have to take. We are the whole club. It is a cricket club, first and foremost. That's what we are. We're not a conference and events facility with a cricket club bolted on. Everybody is geared to grow the revenue of the club, to increase the cricket budget, to give ourselves a better chance of signing better quality players, which then hopefully translates into winning more games. And that is the constant goal for everybody. And it is for all departments on the board, effectively. But the reality is we're probably towards the lower end of the budgets of the 18 first-class counties. I can't give you the exact figure now, but I hazard a guess we're 15, 16, 17, 18th. Some will do better than that, some will outperform, and some will not be spending very clever money in some other instances, really. But I can say that we scrutinise every recruitment decision, and there's lots of names that come up and all the speculation. And the domestic market is tough because you're also dependent, there's no transfer market, so you're also dependent upon the 1st of June coming around, the players that are then available, and we don't have the biggest ticket in town in terms of pay, and also when you're performing as you are in red ball cricket, it's also difficult to sort of sell the dream to somebody in terms of the trajectory of the club. Now, I think we've made some signings that book that trend, like Sir Martin Anderson and people, they can see the journey that we're on. I think, look, Mickey is bullish, he backs himself, and he probably raised expectations across the board. And he'll stand by that because that's his way. And I don't think that's always a bad thing, because it also raises expectations of everybody else. That's we are trying to win games. If you want to better yourself, then you have got to expect more, of everybody. But in doing that, I think he obviously elevated everybody's expectation. I was probably a little bit more sort of dampened in that, and I would rather, under promise and over deliver going forward, and people be more in tune with some of the challenges that we face and how we try to best navigate those when we have, full colour. We're rational people with good connections, but we can only work within sort of the budget and the remit that we have, and we can then only come up with sort of the best scenario and situation at that point in time. And we're always trying to grow and develop that. And obviously we're at a really fascinating inflection point with more money coming into the game, and perhaps how that's going to, change, our ability to continue to improve our squad. And then ultimately it's really exciting then to develop our own players. I mean, that's ultimately what we've not done as well as other counties. We've not developed some of the youngsters that have gone on to play for England, and we've suffered from that also, from the way that what's termed performance related fee payments, PRFP payments as we know them. Take Durham. Durham have £500,000 more PRFP payments than Derbyshire, because rightly so, their pipeline and their pathway has produced a lot of England players that are playing at the moment, and absolutely credit to them. But if we could have 5 100-grand players come into Derbyshire, the team would look completely different, and you would have a solid quality backbone of players. And that's what we've got to get to. And as we look at, we'll come on to the youth development, the pipeline, being a lot more proactive about that. That's what excites me. We've got Harry Moore coming through, the re-emergence, not the re-emergence, Pat probably won't say that, but Pat getting selected in the Inner Lions and doing so well. As we record this, he took 5 for yesterday and got a hat-trick, 5 for 21. Fantastic. He's done that in Australia and in Ashes year. And we've got a couple of wild cards that could be on a plane to Australia, and it's refreshing that obviously the ECB have seemed to have opened up their lens, let's say, in terms of not restricting selection, or historically restricting selection what seemed to be from just Division 1 counties only. So I think it's a really exciting time for us, going forward with the development of some of those players.